From the John DeVito Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts. However, Jim Leon is on special assignment, so in his place we have Mark Vuno and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, February the, what is that? 17th, the year of our Lord, 2016. And now, here they are, Mark and Rich.
Yeah, you know, Mark, I have to say, usually John will say something like still alive and breathing on their own or something like that, but you're too young for that, so...
I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You know what? I'm gonna let me take a second to John. We appreciate the introduction, but actually, this is going to be a different type of show. We had Coach Al Marks on, I don't know, a few months ago, and interviewed him. And today, my guest is Mark Vuno, who, as I was thinking about this, Mark, I'm thinking. I was going to say former All-State quarterback, but I go, you're not former. I mean, when you're All-State, you're All-State forever, right? So,
I guess so.
All-State quarterback, what was the year?
1980.
1980. I was going to jump a little bit forward from that, like 82. But actually, Mark, I went on to the computer before I came here, and I don't want to get heavily into this unless you do, but I saw that you are really... your career, you're the chief editor of now what is the magazine?
It's called
right
Printing News Magazine.
Printing News Magazine, and you've had similar positions with other publications. And I sort of knew that you were in that business, in a real peripheral way, but I didn't know that you were. I mean, to me, you looked like you were very prominent in the business, and you're such a low key guy, for God's sakes, that I never knew that.
Well, you get prominent when you've been in an industry for a couple of decades. So
yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. But just for our audience, I would say I've known Mark Vuno since he was. I would say you were 11 or 12 years old, maybe when I first met you, and. I'm looking now. If you could see Mark, you would see a guy who'd say, he looks like, he's not a boy anymore, but he looks like the boy next door. But I really, over the years, when you look at Ridgewood football players, there's names that would pop out at you in terms of toughness. But and Mark's name probably wouldn't be at the top of that list. But my knowledge of Mark is such that. Very tough guy. I mean, you don't think of a quarterback as tough. You don't think of a guy who's got the all-American looks that Mark has as being tough. But this was a really tough guy, a great football player and a tough football player. And my first experience with Mark was when he was with the Little League Cardinals. And Mark, why don't you tell us, though, because you're unique. I was thinking about this the other day. There was probably maybe... let's say 30 guys in your position that played on two teams in the Norwich Youth Activities Little League football program. Could you explain just a little bit about that?
Sure. And I'll preface that, Rich, by saying I don't think I would consider myself a tough guy at all, but I think football kind of made me tough. And it started back in NYA, and originally I think I was in fourth grade when I started playing, so I would have been about 9, and it was with the Browns. At that time, there were 6 teams in the house league. There were the Browns and the Rams, along with the Bears and the Vikings and the Packers and the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. And then apparently you would probably know better than me, but I think the numbers had come down with the number of kids in the program. This would have been in the 70s.
Right, because the village and the high school was affected by this. The village hit its peak somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s. And it caused the league to expand. And actually, as you were naming the teams, thanks, John, one of the interesting things, the teams that actually were disbanded were the Browns, which I guess you would say was an expansion team, but the Rams were actually one of the original four, and I don't know if it was because of the coaches involved or what the deal was, but the Rams were one of the teams that was eliminated, and the Vikings, which had been an expansion team, stayed as the four that existed up until the league ended. So,
Thank you.
but yeah, you're absolutely right. The numbers were up and then they went down.
Yeah, so the numbers were down, so they did away with the two teams. And I think I was in 6th or 7th grade when it happened. And so they had a draft. Now, you again would probably know better than me, because they just told me, oh, you're going to be drafted by one of the other teams. And I don't know how it worked, but they divvied up the players from the Browns and the Rams into the other four teams.
Yeah, and we were fortunate at the time, Mark. Tony Adornetto, who was a friend of mine from, and in fact, and I'm not going to segue too much, but I knew Tony because he was good friends with a guy by the name of Louis Pappas, and Louis was another ex-Ridgewood football player. But Tony I'd say Tony's probably, let's just say, half a dozen years older than I am, and he was not a community member. He had a business in the community, but he took such an interest that I remember Tony would actually come to my varsity football games, even though, again, he was not technically a member of the Norwich Harwood Heights community. And that's how I got to know Tony. So then I became a coach with him, and I shouldn't say we, Tony drafted you from the Browns onto the Cardinals.
Yeah, Tony, his family owned Universal Lawn Service, right?
Yeah,
Cumberland and Lawrence. Yeah,
right. I mean, if you can picture this for the people listening, where the bank, and I don't know what bank it is, and Walgreens is where Universal Lawn and Garden was.
Bank of America's over there now.
It's B of A, right? Yeah. And it's quite a thriving business that they had, but Tony was the coach of the Cardinals, and the interesting thing for me was the Cardinals were a family thing, because my father had coached the team, I had coached the team, and so had my brother. And then after that, one of my best friends, Bill Olbrich, had coached the team.
And there were some other former Ridgewood guys there too. I remember Butch Navarro, who was a running back at Ridgewood, right, and Michael Coney, who was an all-state center, was one of our coaches. And I think back then, it's funny, I don't even know, is it okay to say this on the radio nowadays? Tony, who I saw maybe 10 years ago, and he's about 100 pounds lighter than he used to be.
Yes.
We used to call him Fat Tony.
Yeah, Fat Tony.
That was the politically incorrect nickname that was okay to say back in the 70s, right?
Well, plus, I mean, he answered to that, so, that was no big deal. I was going to say, though, Mark, you had one of the things I admired the most about you, and it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized that when Mark came over, he was not only one of the new guys, but he was inserted as the quarterback of the team. And there was two things with that. He had come from another team, so he wasn't familiar with the guys that we had. And he also wasn't like an 8th grader. I mean, 7th graders do quarterback those teams. But to come in fresh and then have that responsibility of being the quarterback didn't sit well with a lot of the guys. And some of the guys we had a rough bunch. I have to tell you, it was even hard for us as coaches to keep track of that bunch. And so I one day I said to Mark, Mark and I were talking about this just a few years ago. And he said, Rich, you don't know how tough it was. He goes, those guys used to beat me up after practice. And I'm like, holy, I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, there was some. Well, I guess what you would call roughnecks on that team, and again, it was a family thing. Remember, we had the Potters and the Trupas. And, there were a lot of brothers and servants. Yeah. And I jest about it, but that experience, and back then we hit a lot more, and the quarterbacks and the running backs and the skill guys, the receivers had to do kind of what everybody else did.
Yeah, that's true.
Everything from Murderer's Row to Bull in the Ring, and I was getting my butt handed to me because I was pretty skinny back then.
You weren't a big guy. I always tease people, though. I said, listen, I coached an all-state quarterback, and I could remember this happened maybe once, but you lived right on Oriole, right around the corner from the high school. And I remember meeting up with you like on an early Sunday evening and just throwing the football. I'm sure you got nothing out of that other than, some practice. You warmed your arm up. But I go, oh yeah, individual instruction. This guy wouldn't be All-State if it wasn't for me.
Well, it's kind of a combination of everybody. You and Butch Navarro. And I think back too, Rich, and with perspective, the fact that a seventh grader, like you said, coming into a new team, and I guess the bottom line for me was I was blessed with a pretty good arm, and I developed it, and I was also pretty smart because back then, like I said, I was pretty skinny, but it all just kind of came together, and had some great mentors. One in particular at Ridgewood, like my sophomore year. I don't know if you remember a guy by the name of Jay Koziel.
Oh shoot, yeah. Jay, phenomenal athlete in his own right.
A name from the past, but he taught me a lot about being a quarterback and being a leader that I took with me the rest of the way.
Mark, Jay was one of those guys now, because I haven't thought about Jay Koziel in years, but I got to know Jay pretty well. He was only at Ridgewood for a short time, but I got to know him. I think that Jay would be an ideal guy to pass on the attributes that you just mentioned, because he knew sports in in the head as well as in the body. But Jay, I could remember seeing Jay down on the gym floor with a basketball, and Jay was, I'd say he was 6 feet, 6'1", maybe tops, and he could palm the basketball and jam it. So the first time I saw Jay do that, I'm like, holy crap, this guy is, But Jay was low key about it. I mean, I don't know why he did it the time I saw him, unless he might have been coaching basketball and just fooling around or whatever. But Jay is a guy. The other guy I think of, Mark, that was a big asset to the school and had too short a career with us was Mike Hughes.
Yes. As a matter of fact, for those of you out there listening who may know Coach Hughes, and I don't even think you know this, Rich, but he just had some major surgery about a week ago.
That I didn't know.
Yeah,
no.
His son Danny texted me and let me know that he had, I think, triple bypass and a valve replaced in his heart. So I texted him last week. He's doing good. He's a South Sider, but we love him anyway.
Oh, definitely.
Mike played at De La Salle. I think he's in the Football Hall of Fame at De La Salle. I think he played basketball too. But anyway, he's doing well and on the road to recovery. But yeah, he was another one, obviously along with Coach Marks, and we can get into the whole discipleship of Coach Mariani, who is somebody that as a kid I always wanted to play for, and then as things happened, never got the opportunity to play for because he retired 2 years before I got up to the varsity. Getting back to Coz, he I forget where he played at, Missouri Western or Western Missouri. He played at a pretty major college. I think he had some knee issues, but getting back to the whole toughness thing, the guys that I played with up on varsity, they would always tease the quarterbacks about wearing the red shirt, because we were off limits in practice. You couldn't hit the quarterback in practice. But I'll never forget my sophomore year, Coz, he was kind of hard-nosed guy, and again, he would make me do everything that anybody else did. I'm talking about hitting the sled, going in the chutes, going through the blaster. And at the end of the year, probably week 9, he come up to me and threw me the red shirt, and he goes, "Here, now you can wear this. Now you earned it. Now you command the respect of everybody because you did what they did."
Mark, I don't know if you recall this the way I do, but when we coached the I call it the second incarnation of the Junior Rebels, Mark was the head coach of the team. I was one of the coaches, assistant coaches. And probably knowing Mark better than the other coaches, when we practiced or scrimmaged, a lot of times I was right at Mark's elbow and, finding out what was going on and trying to stay up to speed. But the guy who just quarterbacked our team, and the first time we've made the state playoffs in quite a few years, is Chris Jacobson. And what I never got to know Chris that well, and I didn't really coach him. I mean, you coached him. But one thing I liked about Chris is when we'd have, say, the shoot drill, where you have 2 linemen against a defensive man and a running back. Chris seemed to be, he didn't back away from those drills. And I don't say that you would have held him out of the drills necessarily, but I mean, was always my impression. Chris jumped right in there. You know, he was like, what I liked about him, he was like one of the guys.
Yeah, and I love to see that about him too. I think Chris developed into a pretty good leader. In the last, well, heck, he was in 8th grade at that time, but time flies, Rich. Now he's going to be graduating in May.
He's gone. He's out of there. But Mark, you know what? Let me go to you've been talking about when you were a sophomore. So your first varsity experience was as a junior then?
Yeah, but I did not start. I'm kind of an anomaly.
Okay.
Back in those days, senior leadership was very was valued, by the coaches. And I'll be honest with you, I thought I probably would be or should be starting that year in '79. But you look back at it, I mean, Larry Arrico was our quarterback.
Larry was
Larry was a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
And was a senior. And that team was an 8-1 team that went to the quarterfinals. So you can't argue with the success and whatever the coaches were thinking. But yeah, so I was a varsity player as a junior, but again did not play much.
Yeah, you know what? It's when people jog my memory, I remember these things. I would have never guessed though that Larry was the quarterback that had preceded you. I knew Larry was in there somewhere, and back in the '70s would have been my guess. I didn't know that he was right before you. Mark, who was he the QB, varsity QB when you were a sophomore as well?
No, that would have been Tommy Vallon.
Oh, Tommy Vallon.
So Tommy played for Coach Mariani. Coach Mariani's last year in '77, I believe.
Okay,
he was a junior, and then when Coach Marks took over as head coach, Tommy was a senior. So Tommy was a 2-year player, and Coach Marks inherited Tommy.
Okay.
And then so it was Tommy, and then Larry, and then me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't want to get into this too much, but one of the things I always had admired about Ridgewood, and this is no reflection on Coach Zach, but for some of the time he was there, we didn't have this. But it seemed for so many years we either had, we probably usually had both, not only an outstanding quarterback, but also usually at least one outstanding running back. And now one of the things about when you were a senior, and I don't know how you refer to them, you might refer to them as not as delicately, and when I see them, I don't refer to them that delicately either, but I'll just say there were 3 amigos, was Bobby Georgioff and Dave Mack and Timmy Zorno.
Yeah. I was blessed with, I was blessed with a couple of things. A great offensive line, which incidentally was coached by Gino Nudo, who I now coach with at Fenwick, and a great receiving corps, which, Dave Mack at that time and Bob Georgioff were juniors. My senior year was a junior-loaded team. They went on to go 9-0 the next year.
Okay.
They had a lot of guys coming back. Timmy Zorno was a senior. He was our speed guy, our vertical threat down the field.
Oh, wait till I see him. You were the speed guy. Okay. All right.
He was.
Yeah.
And we spread the ball around pretty equally to those 3 guys.
Yeah, no, I saw most of the games. I believe I might have seen all the games, and you did. That was very impressive.
Yeah, and again, getting back to the whole Coach Mariani mystique, it's funny because I wanted to play for him so badly, and was influenced by him as a youngster, as a sophomore and a freshman. But the ironic part about it, Rich, is you look back on it and the kind of offense that he ran, which was kind of 5 yards in a cloud of dust, very run-dominated offense. It was a blessing in disguise, I think, that I probably didn't play for him because I wouldn't have been throwing the ball as much, I don't think.
Now, Mark, I have to say, and I love Al, and we might have even talked about this when he was here, but I used to laugh because as Coach Marks got on into his tenure, people would say, well, he does the same old stuff and he runs the ball too much. And I was thinking, holy mackerel. I mean, because when Al first got the job, and what made me think of it is you said that you talked about that maybe a blessing in disguise. Al learned so much under Mike, but obviously Al, being the man that he is, had his own views on things. And we, not that we were amazed because we knew there was other things in football besides 5 yards and a cloud of dust, but Al basically, compared to Mike, opened it up right away and people, when he first came on, were like, "Oh my gosh, this was a revelation." And then, as I say, as he went on, people were used to what he did, and they weren't so jazzed by it anymore.
Yeah, I think at the time, Rich, looking back on it, he played to his personnel. There was some of that going on because my senior year, I should say, we lost our starting running back the week before our opener.
Who would that have been?
It would have been Artie Marty, which
Artie Marty, okay.
is a name you probably remember.
Sure.
And Artie was the spiritual leader of our team even as a junior.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is a kid who was maybe 5'9", maybe 165 pounds, but feared no one.
Right.
And before he broke his leg, he was pretty fast. And he broke his leg actually in the green and white scrimmage.
Oh, jeez.
So then we had to bring a kid up from the sophomore team who was Dave Serbin.
And
he was a tall, skinny kid, fast. But I think, Coach Marks at that point had to decide maybe we're going to do it a little differently. And I was, again, the beneficiary of that because we wound up throwing the ball more. And I think also Coach Hughes' influence as well. He liked to throw it a little bit more and have a little more balance. And when I say throw it more, at that time, we maybe threw the ball 20 times a game, which, in that era was kind of a lot.
I would say, yeah, I agree. Definitely a lot. Did you know, Mark? Complete your thought.
I was just going to say that it's funny because Coach Nudo, Gene, when he introduces me to kids now who don't know who I was, and he'll say, kind of off the cuff, Coach Bruno threw for 2,000 yards when nobody threw for 2,000 yards. And I laugh because I don't think it was, maybe it was 1,500, but I'll round it up to 2,000. But yeah, at that time, that was a lot of yards.
No, it's because I would say, again, I think I saw all of your games from your senior year. And to me, it doesn't surprise me. I didn't remember the details. It doesn't surprise me when you tell me that the main running back, the guy who was supposed to carry the load there, Artie broke his leg, and then they brought Dave up, who was only a sophomore. So then, the coach has got to think about exactly what he wants to do. But it seemed to me that you guys threw a lot, comparatively, let's say. I was going to ask you, because you hit on it, and that was going to be my question. You don't have any idea what your stats were, do you?
Oh yeah, a little bit. I mean, again, they're almost comical by today's standards. I played in 9 games as a varsity player my senior year, and I threw for 18 touchdown passes. Again, back then that was a lot.
That is a lot.
But nowadays it sounds 18 big deal.
Guys are probably getting, high school guys are getting twice that many in a season, right?
Yeah,
I mean, but they're throwing all the time.
Yeah, and obviously that was way before the spread offense and. But again, keeping it in perspective, it was good numbers at that time. I think, and again, we spread it around. It wasn't just one guy catching the ball, which is why we were a very prolific offense. I think we averaged 33 points a game in 1980, which was a lot.
Mark, did we play? I remember going to this game, being there. I don't want to say it wasn't IC, but it was in a. The field almost seemed like it was in a park, almost, and it was. I think we might have played a Catholic school, or maybe it was a conference school, but the setting was a little unusual. And I remember you guys either pulled out a close game, or I don't remember the details, but that for some reason that game sticks in my memory.
That one's not coming to me, but it might have been the following year. I know they played IC in 1981, and that was also a year that they played and beat Bishop McNamara, which was a powerhouse back in those days.
Okay.
But that team that came along the year after I left was probably arguably one of the best teams in Ridgewood history.
Just don't tell Pat Scharf that.
We're going to get into the debate of eras. And it's a no-win, but no, they were pretty good.
Yeah. Well, what did you say? They were 9-0 or 8-1?
They were 9-0, and they were ranked. I'm not sure what the ranking was, but they were ranked pretty high in 3A. Mm-hmm. Back then, I think there were 6 classes. And they were on the bubble when the playoff pairings came out, and then they wound up going 4A and lost in the first round of Bennett Academy.
You know what? We can go into those things, but I can recall. People ask me now. They go, what classification are we? I have no clue. And they'll say, well, you're involved with the school. You're a big, sports guy. I go, let me tell you something. The IHSA. Ridgewood, not to say that we had problems with them, but I recall, Mark, almost every year that we made the playoffs, we would either be the biggest school in the class that we thought we were going to be in, but never were, so we ended up always being the smallest school in the classification that they eventually put us in. And the other thing is, it seemed to change, the rules on who went where seemed to change every year. And I followed them, like guys, when guys like you were in school, but at some point they were like, they just lost me, and you know what, this is too much for me to keep track of. So, but yeah, we usually always got sort of screwed in the end in where we ended up.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the formula works. And actually, it still is going on today. Even over at Fenwick a couple of years ago, we weren't sure if we were going to go 6A or 7A, and depending on the enrollments of the other schools that change from year to year, it can change. But the other thing, Rich, that you can maybe again shed some light on, when I played at Ridgewood, we were an independent, which meant we weren't playing in a conference. I'm not sure what year that started, because I know you guys were in a conference when you played, and I think it was it called the Tri-County Conference when Coach Mariani was there?
Yeah, it was a Tri-County, and then I think this was before. Yeah, pretty sure it was before you. The Tri-County broke up, and when you look at the schools that were in the old Tri-County, you could see why, because Lake Park and Mundelein come to mind. Those schools were getting too bigger for some of the schools that ended up staying, which is us and Elmwood Park and Fenton.
And didn't you have to go way south to like Crete Monee, or were they in the conference?
Not in that conference. Most of the time we went north. I think the farthest we used to go was up to Dundee to play Crown.
Okay.
But what I was going to say is then I think there was a 5-team conference, which was the O'Hare Suburban, and it was Ridgewood, Fenton, Elmwood Park, and Maine North, when they had a Maine North, was in that conference. And I don't remember what the 5th school was. And then I want to say Maine North was only in existence for a short time. They closed, and I think it was we didn't have enough teams to form a conference anymore. And we went independent for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And you guys were there when that happened.
And looking back on that again, that sort of bit us, because at that time, if you were an independent, to get to the playoffs, to even get a berth, you had to be 8-1 or 9-0.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I tell kids, I was 7-2 my senior year, and they're like, how'd you do in the playoffs? And I said, well, we didn't go to the playoffs. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You were 7-2, you didn't go to the playoffs?
Right, that's true.
It still kind of burns me up. But
yeah.
and the worst part about it, Rich, was we were 7-1 going into week 9, and then we lost a close game to at that time West Leiden, which East and West I think merged the next year, so that was like the last hurrah for West Leiden back in those days.
Mark, for you know what, when you say that too, West Leiden, I saw that game. Remember seeing that game, and they played, to me, I mean, not to say they weren't good to begin with, they probably were, because that's a big school, but I think they were playing inspired football for that reason too. They knew it was going to be their last game as that school. And that was a lot of the talk, I think, at the time, too. I mean, how well they played. And you guys, refresh my memory. I thought you guys were, like, driving for the lead touchdown. I mean, like, right at the end of the game, and I don't remember what happened.
Yeah, I think there was a fumble on the goal line. It was or maybe a goal line stand. Yeah, we were down on the 1 yard line and didn't punch it in. And that was the only game, I think, all year that we were held under 4 scores. We only had 12 points that day. No offense to Coach Marks or any of the coaches, but I think we got a little bit out-coached that day. Pete Ventrilli was the coach, and he went on to coach at Downers North or South for a long time after that.
Yeah.
They had a good game plan against us.
Well, you never can go against an Italian coach. They're all good.
Especially if his last name ends in a V, right? Or starts with a V.
John, do you need to break? Are we at the break already? See how fast this. Okay. You know what? We're going to go away for just a second and turn it over to John.
You're listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, February the 17th with Mark Bruno and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, Illinois. And now back to Mark and Rich.
Just to, in case anybody is joining us, Mark Bruno is here as my guest. And Mark, I introduced you, I think, as an all-state as an all-state quarterback, but obviously, a Ridgewood football player. You played college football at Lake Forest. You coached football at Ridgewood, and you're currently coaching at Fenwick. I was going to say, though, Mark, when you talked about being independent, I could remember being on the school board, and we had, it's a man who has got a woman's first name that was head of the IHSA sports division. I want to say it was Cheryl something. But we actually had this person in to a school board meeting because Dan Romito was the president of the board, and obviously he had an interest in sports. And here we are, an independent for quite a while. Can you help us out? And of course, we got an hour of a song and a dance. And I'm not saying this to down the man because, you come out to a school, you meet with them. You're not going to have a 5-minute meeting, so you got to give them some time. But the ultimate answer, obviously, was that they actually couldn't help us. And I think we maybe sort of knew that in advance, but we were getting to the point where, hey, let's get this done. And I could remember Coach Marks telling me, were you playing, Mark, when we played not Lake Forest Academy, but Lake Forest High School?
Yeah, I remember playing them as a sophomore up on JV.
Okay.
Yeah.
We I believe, had a home-and-home deal with them, and we beat them at home. And I think the second year we traveled, and I remember being out there on a nice, sunny, warm fall day and beating them in their place. And I remember Coach Marks telling me, or maybe it wasn't Coach Marks, somebody else may have told me, we wanted to get into their conference. I'm not sure what conference that is. And they wouldn't let us in. And we said, well, look, we're going to be the smallest school in the conference. And we showed them all of our, projected enrollment data and everything. And they wouldn't believe it. They thought we were lying. They said, no, you guys play too well. You can't be that small. And we said, no, we are that small. And, this is, but I don't know if that's what they're kind of, it's like a North Suburban or something like that. But we applied to get into that conference, and they would not let us in.
Doesn't surprise me. And that was sort of our MO back then, right? I mean, the small school didn't have a lot of big kids, but we didn't back down from, being an independent. We were forced to play a lot of bigger schools. I think my senior year we played Streamwood, which was at least a 5A school back then. Maine North was still around. They were a bigger school.
Mm-hmm.
We were forced to play bigger schools, but that was kind of the whole chip on the shoulder thing that Coach Marks was big on. Didn't matter.
Mark, I have to ask you this. No, I better not ask you this because it will. I don't want to have it reflect poorly on anybody, but so I'll go on to something else. But I was gonna, describe when you. Because you brought this up, and I think sometimes people today living here in the community may not understand it. But when you said chip on the shoulder type of attitude, I think in my mind, I know what that means, and I think that's a good description. But can you verbalize that a little bit and say what you really think about that?
Sure. I mean, I think we had something to prove, and we weren't always the biggest kids. I look back to my senior year roster, and up front we were decent size. We had some 200-pounders up on the line, some a little bigger, which at the time was pretty big. But generally that wasn't the case. Ridgewood was kind of known for the pair of 160, 165-pound guards. That were athletic and could move. But and that was just kind of beaten into us. I think Coach Marks, he was a great motivator. And made you believe. and kind of the whole David and Goliath syndrome, that especially in high school football where size doesn't matter as much as maybe it does when you get up into the higher levels.
True. I mean, when I think about it, I'll just talk about some of the guys that were on your team that you've mentioned, but guys like yourself, who I've gotten to know now as an adult. Dave Mack, who played softball for me for many years, and I got to know Dave well. Timmy Zorno and the Marty brothers. You mentioned Artie. When you think about those types of guys, you and the other guys I mentioned, those are competitive guys, from day one. So when you get a coach who then finds a way to motivate them to a little bit a higher level, I mean, then you've got really something to deal with if you're the opposing team.
Yeah, I think so. And, Artie, the Marty brothers are a case in point. They just weren't big guys, but they were tough guys. And, like we like to say, Rich, if you're in a dark alley, you want them walking on your side of the alley.
There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that.
And I think over the years, there's been a lot of guys like that at Ridgewood.
Yeah.
Guys before me who I looked up to, and whether it's Tim Moroder or
Dave Majewski or somebody like that.
These guys that you hear about and saw play. When I was going and getting in free with my NYA jersey and looking at these guys, and I want to be these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned to you before the broadcast, I'm watching the girls basketball game, regional game last night, and with Tommy Lentine, who is not a Ridgewood guy. He is the AD at Montini. But we were talking about, he said, boy, I think he mentioned something about Ridgewood coaches and how a lot of them had been former players, and that, and what he knew about the school was that worked out really well. And I said, boy, when I talk to Coach Marks, because I probably talk to Al 3-4 times a year, he'll usually bring that up. He'll say, we were successful, but a lot of the success is because Ridgewood guys were coaching other Ridgewood guys. Yeah,
there was a lot of that. Guys would come back, like Gene Nudo is a case in point. I think he was still maybe in school at Illinois State, when he was coming around helping out when he could, when I was a senior. And that was kind of the start of his coaching career. And there were other guys like that, too, over the years. But I think Coach Marks and Coach Papone, obviously, who was kind of Coach Marks' right-hand man running the defense for a long time, they both brought that attitude to the team on both sides of the ball.
I know that when Ridgewood made the playoffs, I had texted you and I said, well, do you think that this is just a coincidence that you and I just said you and I, but, Danny Santucci, Brian Harrigan, who were both ex-Ridgewood football players, were part of the coaching staff that year. I find that I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the guys who are good players this year, your Jacobsons and your Scolettas and Joe Vanellis and whoever else was out there, and there were quite a few that we had coached, had that success. Because as you're talking about, Ridgewood guys coaching other Ridgewood guys, I know we were all from different eras, but I think the attitude was one of, raising the bar.
Yeah, I think so. And not that we can take all the credit for those kids.
No,
obviously,
not at all.
And Seth Kruger is the other one. And when
Seth, right?
When Seth came to us on the Junior Rebels, the same with Vinny. They were already pretty good football players.
Sure.
And you could tell that they were hitters and they liked to hit. And that's just something that they carried with them. But in addition to Coach Zach, who's not a Ridgewood guy, I think he went to Argo on the south side. But he brings his own, element of toughness over there.
Yeah.
But he's got a couple of guys like Pat Rossi, who is a former Ridgewood guy, and Vince Finelli is over there helping out. So there's some guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Matter of fact, I'm going to date myself, but Vince, I coached Vince back in the late '90s when I was coaching at Ridgewood, and they had some pretty good teams back in the late '90s.
I was going to say, and this you were probably there at the time, but when Tommy Pagliaro was playing at Ridgewood, and I saw this guy, and I seen all of the good Ridgewood running backs going all the way back to Dick Young and Roy Spielvogel and guys like that, which is prior to the Mariani era. And this guy is the best. And I thought, well, we're not going to see another guy like this too soon. And the next year or so, Sam Palazzo came along, and I looked at Sam and I go, geez, no disrespect to Tommy, but this guy might be better because not only was he fast, but he was bigger and stronger.
Yeah, Sam, who actually is a Harwood Heights cop now.
Yeah,
He's pretty jacked, and I think at the time he was probably 185 pounds, which then was a pretty good sized back.
He was a stocky, like strong kid, as you say.
Yeah.
You know what, Mark? Let me ask you this: what does it feel like? Or how did you, or maybe this is two questions in one, when they told you that you're going to be All-State, how did that feel, and how did they tell you?
Boy, it's so long ago, Rich. I don't think anybody told me. I think I knew the team was coming out, and I picked up the paper and saw it for myself in the IMC, to be honest with you. It felt incredible. I mean, But it's such a team game, and I always feel like individual awards in football don't really fly very far because, like I said, I had a great line, I had great receivers around me, and not to sound cliche, but it's true. You know how it is. Nothing good happens unless you've got time to throw the ball and you've got people who can catch it. So I felt like it was an award for everybody. The weird thing about it is, as I think back, and it's been, 35 years, I'm still the only All-State quarterback to ever come out of Ridgewood, which I scratch my head about because there's been some really good players that have played there,
Yeah.
So maybe the stars were just aligned right that year.
Well, you already alluded to a few things that were unintentional positive consequences for the time that you're a quarterback there. I always think back. I'm not a White Sox fan, but in 2004, when the White Sox were World Series champions, I started to think. I go, no matter what you do, if you're say a championship team, or you're All-State or you make a Hall of Fame, there's a little luck always involved, and by luck, I don't mean that what you personally are doing is luck, but like in the case of the White Sox, I go, well, how many championship teams had 3 separate closers in a year, which they did. And so there's always that element of, I'll call it luck, but, it's really, in your case or in a lot of other people's cases, everything lining up just right. So, which is good. I mean, it takes nothing away from anything.
No, and I think part of it is people, willing to toot your horn a little bit for you. And I think Coach Hughes, he was a good public relations guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he, I don't know who he talked to or what he did, but he helped to get my name out there, so that the people who maybe didn't know about Ridgewood or me or what we were doing, I think he generated some good publicity. And also I think, confidence is a fragile thing when you're a kid, and to have people like Al Marks or Jay Koziel tell you, how great you could be or what potential you have, and then you start to believe that, maybe, I remember as a sophomore, Jay Koziel telling me, you keep doing what you're doing, and you could be an All-State quarterback. And at the time, I'm thinking, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? What is he? What's All-State? What is that?
Mark, you're making me laugh because when we had Al here, we're talking, and I said, Al, I said, when I played, I said, first off, I didn't even know there was all conference, much less, All-State or whatever. And I said, all we did is, we showed up for practice. They said we're going to play the game on a Saturday or once in a while a Friday night. And I go, we went out and played, because that's what we wanted to do, and we were with our buddies, and we didn't think about any of this stuff. And he was like, man, he says, he says, Rich, you're right, I agree with you. But he says, what a difference. He goes, I got parents coming up to me and, my kid needs a scholarship or this, whatever, this, that, and the other thing. You know what the deal is because you're coaching yourself.
Yeah, it's a different world today. And today the kids have so much more opportunity, maybe to the point of being overkill with, the off-season camps. And for a lot of these kids, it becomes year-round, which I'm not convinced is the best way. But there's a lot of pressure, not to fall behind. But I was talking to Gino maybe last year, or the year before, about how things that they do now. The 7-on-7 tournaments in the summertime, which is just skeleton passing.
Sure.
We didn't do that.
No.
And all the other camps that are available now to the kids, they weren't around. We were just, apparently it was pre-video game generation, and we had nothing better to do. So we would meet, on our own at the field in the morning and throw the ball around.
I think looking back, that's probably the most important thing you did, because I'm not saying everybody, but almost everybody in those situations might have take a turn to be the quarterback or the running back or a defensive or offensive lineman. You got to tackle and block as well as do the skill stuff. So you learned a lot about playing the game. And I don't think the kids today, for the most part, I'm not saying all of them, have that opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think the other thing is you need to be willing to put in the work.
That's true.
People say, "Oh, well, my son said to me a few months ago, well, you could throw the ball, really good, Dad." I'm like, well, yeah, I could, but I didn't wake up and was born that way. Yeah, I had a little bit of natural ability.
That's for sure.
But then I developed it, and I remember, hokey stuff like hanging a tire. My dad hung a tire from the tree in the backyard, and I would throw the ball through the tire, and it seems monotonous and boring, but you swing it and you're hitting a moving target, and you do it enough. I'm talking hundreds of balls at a time, and
you get accurate.
But you got to do it.
Yeah,
you got to be able
to
put in the work. And I think a lot of kids they see it on TV and they see people making it look easy, and they think, oh, those guys are just naturally talented. To a point.
I was going to say my daughter was a pretty good basketball player, and she would say, it'd get to be winter, and maybe you're over Christmas break or something, so there's no gym available. She says, well, I can't shoot. Well, we had a big hoop out in the backyard. I said, well, go out and shoot. Yeah, it's 15 degrees out and the wind's blowing. I said, who cares? I said, adjust. So I have a friend, Tanya Johnson, who is a great high school basketball coach in the Hall of Fame, but she was a professional basketball player. So I hooked Tara and Tanya up one day, and I said, Tanya, did you ever shoot when it was cold out? And I won't go into the whole story, but she says, Rich, I shot when it was cold out, when it was dark out, when it was snowing, when it was raining. And the bottom line is, she goes, I loved it. Well, she loved it so much she was able to turn it into a professional career for a while. And that would be the message I would have to all these kids. We love doing it so much, and we're not pros, but we got out there in whatever kind of weather and did whatever,
Yeah. And I say to my receivers now, and sometimes they look at me like I'm from a different planet. How many balls did you catch today? Did you count them? I remember when I was in high school, Mark Herman was a big quarterback at Purdue.
Right.
And I read or heard something about Mark Herman. How Mark Herman threw 500 balls a day, and I'm like, oh my God, 500 balls. That's a lot. That's a lot of throws, But he was putting in the work, And the other thing I have to give a shout out to as far as the work ethic element of, even though I never played football for him, was Paul Ferking, who was my basketball coach at Giles, and instilled in me and all the boys, I think, who played for him, a tremendous work ethic in terms of hustle and being able to be aggressive and dive for loose balls, and not that I was a great basketball player by any means, but that gets instilled at you at a pretty young age, 4th, 5th grade, whatever it is, and that stays with you.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so I think even though Ferk did go on to coach football at Ridgewood, but our paths in football never crossed. But I thank him for that.
When you talk about that type of thing, too, I always think, and football is probably the ideal game for this, but I don't care what the sport is. There's not that many people who are maybe physically just so, lack such coordination that they can't do anything. There's a few, but not many. So that means probably 90-some% of the population could do something athletic-wise. Now, I'm not saying they could be stars, but when you hustle, as you said, you learn how to go after a loose ball. You battle for a rebound. We're talking basketball here, but it would apply in other sports and other types of actions. You can be a productive part of a team and not be the greatest athlete per se.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was a case in point on the basketball court. I sort of had an outside shot for a while as a kid, from the wing, but I was mostly a role player. Played tenacious defense and the kind of the Dennis Rodman in his later part of his career. Not a whole bunch of offense, but you still have a role on the team.
Yeah, I mean it's a good thing. Mark, could you talk? And this is a part of your history that I don't know a whole lot about. I know a little bit about it, but when you went from Ridgewood in college, you were at Lake Forest, and I know you played football there.
Yeah, I did. I played all 4 years there. I was not heavily recruited out of high school, unfortunately, and did not get an offer from a bigger school. So I wound up. I had narrowed my choices down. I was going to go to Illinois Wesleyan, and then at the last minute, I think in early May, I got a call from the coach at Lake Forest College, which I had never even heard of, even though it's only about 40 miles away. His name was Mike Dow, and I think I was not even 18 at the time. My birthday was maybe a week away, and you're so impressionable at that age, and I was young and stupid, and he said something like, well, I'd like you to come up and see our campus and, bring your parents, and just want you to know we like to throw the ball a lot, and if they give me 5 downs, I'm going to throw on all 5. And that was all I needed to hear. I'm like, oh, I'm going. Maybe not the smartest reason to go, but wound up getting a great education up there, and extended my playing for another 4 years and had a blast. So
that's a good thing. Mark, I was going to ask you, when you say you were an all-state quarterback, you weren't recruited heavily. I just wanted your opinion. Sometimes I laugh when I'll see the papers will say, well, this guy is a great athlete, whether he's a football player or basketball, whatever. And I'll think to myself, yeah, but is he a good, whatever his sport is? He may be a great athlete, but is he a good football player? Would you say that maybe in today's atmosphere where things are, everybody's a little bit more high profile, do you think that maybe you could have played at a higher level college-wise?
I think I could have at the time. Quarterbacks are a lot more athletic now today than I was. I was sort of a mini version of Bernie Kosar. Didn't have great wheels, more of a drop back passer.
Sure.
But that's the system that we were running back then. In college, I ran the West Coast offense, which was kind of Bill Walsh's claim to fame at San Francisco, and this was in the early '80s, so it was sort of new back then. It was ball control, but I don't know. I don't like to make excuses. Who knows why things didn't happen as far as the recruiting goes. Part of it, I think, too, was at the time, Rich. If you think back, colleges, big schools wanted tall quarterbacks for whatever reason.
That's true.
Guys were 6'4", 6'5", and I'm only 6'1", and I think that worked against me a little bit. And Coach Marks was one of those guys who didn't like to lie on the program. So if you were 6'1", at the time I think I was 175 pounds.
So that's what you were on the program.
That's what I was listed, and I think a lot of recruiters assumed that those numbers were inflated. So maybe they thought I was only 5'11" or 5'10" and 160 pounds. Who knows? But I think that was part of it at the time, because definitely the numbers were there. And who knows? I'm sure Ridgewood, being a smaller school, didn't help the situation.
I've always thought that there's where, I don't care how good you are, luck still always comes into play, because you're gonna go to a place, whether it's college, the pros, even in high school, where depending on the needs of the program or the biases of the coach, if you want to put it that way, or coaches. Some places you're going to go and they're going to say, oh, man, great to see you. We love having you here. And other places, not to say they're going to kick you in the butt and tell you to get out, but, maybe they got a lot of what you already can bring, and so they're not as excited. And it's just, even in the pro, maybe the pros more than anything, it's the luck of the draw, because you could be a hot shot, you could be an all-American quarterback, but if you're going to the team that's got Tom Brady on it, I guess you're not going to, they're not that glad to see you until he's gone. But,
yeah.
There's a lot of that involved in sports.
Sure, there's a little bit of that. And I, heck, I'm not, There were guys before me, and you know these names. Guys that went to bigger schools, Mike Lacconi and Dominic Forte.
Sure.
And then guys after like Frankie Trenadu. I forget where Frankie went to college, but he played arena ball.
He went to Elmhurst.
Elmhurst, yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a big school, but and I can't remember. There were some other.
Don Nielsen.
Yeah.
I think that was Donnie was after you. I think.
Yes, Miami of Ohio. I think
Yeah.
Donnie went to, which is in the MAC. Good football. We've got a former Fenwick guy playing tight end up there right now, Ryan Smith, great kid. So yeah, and I can't remember if Tommy Jacobs played football. He might have went into the military, but he was another great one in the early '80s.
I know that Pat Scharf played at Northern and then transferred to one of the I don't know if it was Eastern or Central Michigan or one of those. Yeah, there's been guys who've gone on. And I'm not saying this as a negative, but it seems that people say Norwich and Harwood Heights is the bubble. Norwich is the bubble, and in some cases that's just bourgeois. But in other cases, though, I see kids will go to another school, to a school out of state or whatever, and it's just not the same atmosphere. I mean, it's more of a business now, and they're not as comfortable, and they might last a year or two, and then come home or whatever. And I'm not knocking that at all because high school football is great competition, but it's still fun, and once you go to that next level, it's a little bit different atmosphere.
Yeah, I think more so now too, because even the smaller schools, the Division III schools like where I went, they recruit, nationally now, which in the past, going back a few decades, wasn't the case. I think Lake Forest last year had 90 guys on their roster. They recruit from Arizona, they recruit from all around the country. And
which was that Lake Forest?
Lake Forest College, yeah. It's a small school, but football is very competitive now, even at that level. Then you go into Division II or Division I, and
that's crazy.
It's like you say, it's a business.
Yeah.
I read an article a few months ago. I used to love football, and then they gave me a scholarship. It's early morning meetings, it's weights, it's meetings later in the day. It's round the clock.
Yeah, I mean it's like having a job. So, Mark, you know what? And really, John usually let us go as long as we like. But I would before we wrap up, because we've been doing this for an hour and it's been going really well. I know you talked a little bit about coaching Ridgewood, but that is something that you did back in the 90s. But I'm really I'm a Fenwick fan. I mean, if Ridgewood is number one on my radar, Fenwick is number two, and Montini is number three, probably because I have friends there. What's going on at Fenwick with yourself and the team and the program?
Well, we're excited about this coming year. This will be my fifth year over at Fenwick. I came with Gino his first year there, and for those people who don't know, Gene Nudo is I think he graduated from Ridgewood maybe in '76. I think he's about 5 years older than me.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But Gene was a coach and an executive in the Arena Football League with the Arizona Rattlers for about 20 years and lived out in Phoenix for that long. And then came back 5 years ago to Chicago. And I had heard about it and reached out to him and wanted to know if he needed any help on the offensive side of the ball. And he was actually looking for a quarterbacks coach. So, again, the stars aligned, and I've been over there with him. This will be our fifth season. We started very strong. Had a 7-2, then an 8-1 season. Last couple years, the conference has changed. You mentioned Montini. They've come over into the Catholic League now, and we now have a green division. So there's Montini, St. Francis, Wheaton, some new schools in the conference. So the last couple years, not as many wins and losses. Although 2 years ago we did go advance to the quarterfinals. Mm-hmm. Had a 5-4 regular season record, which a lot of people might not be impressed by, but we were very battle tested, playing some really tough competition in the Catholic League, obviously.
There's nothing but tough competition there.
Yeah.
I mean, at least from my perspective, maybe that's not as true as I'm making it sound, but from my perspective, that is very tough competition.
So this year, it reminds me of my this team that we had this year reminded me of my team, my senior year at Ridgewood, a very junior-dominated team. So we've got a lot of kids coming back. I think we have 18 starters coming back on both sides of the ball, which is exciting.
That's real exciting.
Yeah, we should if we can stay healthy, which was a bit of a problem last year. We're expecting some great things.
I know when I talked to Tommy last night, he said, I said, well, Tom, what's it going to look like with you guys for football next year? And he says, well, he said the big problem for us is trying to schedule outside the conference. So he says we end up starting off with Maine South, then Lake Zurich, and then he started to mention conference games. He said, so we have 5 tough games right out of the box, and Fenwick was one of the schools that he named. So I'm sure those guys probably have their ears to the ground and they know what you guys got coming back. So they're looking out for that game as being one of the tough ones on their schedule.
Well, it's nice to know that we're on Montini's radar.
Maybe you could show them a few things this year. You never know. You never know. How many? What is the enrollment at Fenwick, Mark?
I think it's around 1,100 or so. Don't quote me on that, Rich, but I think it's right around the 1,000, 1,100 area. Co-ed now, which the guys, the older guys like us who were around 30, 40 years ago, they think it's still 1,200 boys. Well,
yeah,
those days are gone.
A lot of days are gone, Mark. I'm telling you, a lot of things are gone.
We were playing a game at we played DePaul Prep, which used to be called Gordon,
Tech.
Right? Across the street from Lane Tech, and we played at Lane Stadium. And every time I see that school, I'm like, oh my God, it takes up a whole city block.
Yeah.
And at one time, 5,000 boys went to Lane Tech. I mean, it's just massive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's huge. It's you know what? Those were the days. I was. I'll tell you, it's. I'm always anxious to look at the paper and see the football results, because I'm usually seeing or can easily get the Ridgewood results. These days it's not as easy to get everybody else's results, but after Ridgewood, the first one I look for football-wise is Fenwick, because I know you and Gene are over there. And another guy who I don't know like you guys, I know him slightly, but I think, is Chris Norton still there?
No.
Or did he move on?
He moved on, actually. Chris is coaching at Elmhurst College now.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that's been a couple of years.
My alma mater. So
yeah, he's doing good over there, and parlayed his Fenwick and Ridgewood experience into another level.
Well, God bless him.
Yeah.
You know what, Mark? I tell you what, we could probably go on for a while. But you know what? Before I give John the high sign and we go off the air, though, if there's something that you wanted to add to the conversation and we didn't touch on, just let me know, and we can talk for a little bit.
I honestly can't think of anything, Rich. Like you say, we could probably spend another couple hours here if we wanted to, but we'd probably bore the rest of the audience.
You know what? One thing, we give you a lot of Ridgewood history, because in the course of this hour, not only have we talked about Mark, who's obviously one of the great players to play at Ridgewood and one of the great people to come out of Ridgewood High School, but covered a lot of other names, coaching and player wise.
A couple names that maybe, Rich, I should throw out. Talking about some of the great quarterbacks who have come out of Ridgewood, and it's funny because some of the other guys will give me the business and try to get Coach Marks to say, come on, Coach, who is the best quarterback ever? And everybody assumes that it was me because I'm all state, but no, there was a lot of great players that came out of Ridgewood, at the quarterback position, and some of these guys, I was in college at the time, so I didn't see him play that much. But Tommy Lebeck was one who was a phenomenal athlete, and then of course there was Greg Klosik, who played I think for 3 years, had a great career. He's got all the career records because he played for 3 years. And I think he went on to play at maybe Illinois. I can't remember where Greg went, but another phenomenal talent at quarterback. So yeah, by no means am I the only guy.
I'm thinking of some guys who were there. Keith Wilson would be one, and Joey Marzano. These guys preceded you. Tony Scala, who ended up want to say he and Kurt Aloisio ended up being the guards on the was it Western Illinois?
Eastern.
Was it Eastern?
Eastern, yeah.
The Eastern Illinois, they won the, I don't know, was it Division II national champions
I
or
believe
whatever?
they did. Yes, they did.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. And then even going fast forwarding to the late '90s, I was at Ridgewood in the late '90s and early 2000s, and Butch DeFelice.
Yeah, that's right, Butch.
Who was Rick DeFelice's son, who also went to Ridgewood. Another kid who played for 3 years, and was a really solid quarterback back in those days.
Actually, his father was a teammate of mine. So, you know what, Jen? I'll tell you what, we could probably have you here for, we said another couple hours. If we start talking old Ridgewood players and what they did and, how well they did, we could probably be here for way more than 2 hours. So, but yeah, you're right, Mark. There's been a lot of good, very good, and you know what? When people ask you these questions, Jim and I talk about this sometime on the regular show. There's a guy who comes in the library and he's a baseball fan, and he'll say, "Who's the greatest baseball player of all time?" And I'll sit there, think for 30 seconds. Babe Ruth? Oh no, it's Willie Mays because of this. And I said to Jim, I said, you know what? If you tell me that we have Mark Bruno and George Shepard, and they're going to be our quarterbacks, right? Then we're going to have two teams. We're going to pick teams, and we flip a coin. And I get Mark Bruno. I said, "Are you going to be unhappy getting George Shepard?" I go, "No." See, people like to make these comparisons, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, they're great players, and it's just who do you like? But you know what? If I like Willie Mays better than Mickey Mantle, but I end up with Mickey Mantle, I'm not going to be crying about it.
Right.
So
George Shepard. There's another name. A guy that I idolized. I think he came up through the Browns because his brother Mike was, I think, a year older than me, but I remember George, and I just saw him a few months ago at the little shindig they had for Coach Marks, which was really nice. And again, just different styles. George was more of an athlete. I don't claim to be a great athlete, but I could throw the crap out of the ball.
Hey,
so different.
Like I say, you're not going to cry no matter and you could probably throw in a dozen names of Ridgewood quarterbacks. And the 12th guy on somebody's particular list, you still want that guy because he's going to be a really good quarterback. So,
well, Rich, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me to do this. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully the audience gets a kick out of it.
I hope so, and I know that it's always good seeing you, Mark, and we appreciate you coming, and we will. You know what? You're going to have to. One of these days, I'm going to make one of your Fenwick games. So
I hope so. And John, thank you too for having me.
You're welcome, sir.
Thanks, John. I guess. Jim usually does the wrap up. So all I'm going to say is Jim usually says we're out of here. We're tail lights. So I'll say what he says. And Mark, thanks again.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John Navita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, February the 17th, the year 2016, on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with the WRHS FM sports announcer Rich Massaro and his special guest Mark Vuno. This broadcast was directed by John Navita. Our special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Zeflik of WRHS FM Norwich and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, February the 16th, the year 2016. Until next time, please be safe, and thanks for listening. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM, Norridge, Illinois. Have a great day, everyone.